Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics: Young and the Restless full episode Tuesday, September 16th. When Sally is forced to save Billy from his own ambitions. From the moment she first hears that Billy is secretly teaming up with Kane to advance a controversial AI software project, Sally knows she has little choice but to be the nasty naysayer in a room full of men addicted to winning. She doesn't deny Billy Sharwit or Kane's resourcefulness, but the red flags that are flying up and down the hallways of Abbott Communications make it impossible for Sally to pretend that everything is under control. Closed-door meetings with too few technical people present. Presentations that reek of haste, vaguely written terms about ownership and control of infrastructure. It all adds up to a stormy soundtrack. And what's worse, when Sally tries to reach out to Adam to find a counterweight to Billy, she finds another front in motion. Newman wants to grade the AI software and test it directly on Abbott Communications as a test of strength, a move that is both blatant and subtle. Instead of seeing a way out, Sally finds herself caught between two pincers. Billy, meanwhile, is increasingly fascinated with the idea of using the AI threat as leverage to force Victor to back down. He envisions a game in which Newman himself will be forced to concede to the Billy-Kane alliance's technological superiority, or at least make concessions on some media fronts. But the threatening Victor will make him do what you want argument seems like a dangerous joke to Sally. Victor doesn't react like a normal person. He builds up patience, builds up defenses, uses his network of influence to crush his opponents, and above all doesn't forget to keep a record of his grievances. In other words, if Billy chose the provocative path, the consequences would not stop at market share or a contract. It would be a long-term battle that would erode the entire ecosystem on which Abbott Communications relied. And Kane's Sally had never trusted the man, especially since he had been so generous with his software handover agreement. Her intuition told her that anything that seemed too good to be true was bound to have a trap hidden underneath. The truth was that Kane had spun the net. In his technical proposals, he had left vertical threads, infrastructure anchors that only the keyholder could activate, a non-public license server located in a private cloud, a set of performance optimization modules that could be disabled remotely, a cross-platform update model distribution mechanism where only Kane could push the fine-tuned weights into production. On paper, after the handover, Billy was the flag bearer. In fact, whenever Kane wanted, he could make the AI software cough, reduce performance, incur costs, or freeze up when Abbott needed it most, forcing his partner to call for help. It wasn't just a technical backdoor. It was an invisible leash around the neck of a communications company hungry for speed and data. Billy believed he had commercial leverage over Kane. Kane believed that whoever keeps the infrastructure wins. And with technical bottlenecks beyond the understanding of most, Kane was winning quietly. Sally didn't have hard evidence to expose the scheme in its entirety. But her worries weren't vague obsessions. She saw how the terms of administrative access were buried in addendums, how extended support services were tied to obscure incident triggers, how cloud cost estimates were softened to look cheap at the beginning but had steep escalations as traffic exceeded thresholds. Faced with these fragments, Sally knew she could no longer remain an observer. She decided to shift her state from protester to doer. Her goal was not to destroy Billy's project, but to save him. To save him from the very belief that he could ride a tidal wave without being engulfed by it. The most logical path to intervention, Sally thought, was to involve Jack. Jack had experience, power, and most importantly, the ability to set boundaries with both Newman and any supplier who dared to play dirty. However, the internal context made it possible to approach Jack directly, which was a potential backlash. Sally chose a buffer. She updated Diane Jenkins first, not because she trusted Diane more than Jack, but because Diane had a pulse on Jack's psyche and understood the blind spots he could fall into when his familial feelings and Abbott pride were aroused by someone. Sally told Diane 3 things. 1. Billy was relying on threats to extract concessions from Victor, a strategy that could trigger a devastating backlash. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. 2. Kane likely retained life and death over the software through infrastructure and modules that were difficult to control. Third, Newman is considering grading AI and testing it on Abbott Communications, which would mean turning Billy's company into a free lab or worse, an example for the media to hand over to them. Diane doesn't miss the implication. If Jack doesn't act now, the Abbott family could pay with both reputation and fortune when the dust settles. On the Newman front, Adam is pushing a parallel agenda. He admits to Chelsea that he's spoken directly to Victor about grading AI platforms and that testing Abbott Communications isn't just a technical matter. It's a gamble. If Abbott collapses under the load, Newman will have live evidence to discredit his rival. If Abbott survives but reveals governance flaws, Newman will have an excuse to gain deeper oversight. Adam believes he can convince Chelsea to join in, that they can walk the tightrope between strategic interests and professional ethics, but Chelsea hesitates. She saw a series of disastrous outcomes. Abbott's people being crushed in a never-ending optimization cycle, proprietary data leaked through opaque integrations, and most of all, the ethical fissures when she somehow helped hack Billy's company, who despite her long absence, still had a layer of affection for her. Still, the scales at Chelsea had recently tipped slightly in favor of Team Newman. When Adam made a commitment to boundaries and risk mitigation, she softened, agreeing to play along with the condition that she would have the power to pull the brakes if she saw the danger pass. Recognizing that both pincers were closing, Sally immediately designed a specific course of action. 1. Require an independent technical audit before any handover of control, including a review of the license server, an audit of the administrative endpoints, an audit of the performance optimization module, and the model update process. 2. Separate the staging infrastructure from Abbott's production system, and absolutely do not connect to the same live data queues without safety certification. 3. Force the partner Kane to sign a legal addendum prohibiting the retention of remote switches in any form with a penalty clause large enough to make cheating irrelevant. 4. If Newman wants to grade, they must sign a multi-layered NDA, agree to let a third party store the logs, and only test on de-identified aggregate data, and absolutely do not touch Abbott's internal pipeline. 5. Notify Jack of the risk via Diane, but also prepare a soft landing plan for Billy, a way out so he doesn't lose face by taking a step back in front of the public and his family. As Sally turned her recommendations into action, she understood that the decision would involve confronting both emotions and power. Billy might see her as a troublemaker, someone who didn't trust him. Kane would surely play the offended one, accusing her of not understanding technology. Newman's side would try to win her over with flattering offers. But Sally chose to be in the toughest position, the position of being responsible for the long-term consequences. She didn't fear short-term bad publicity because the only thing that kept her up at night was the image of Abbott Communications as a tech hostage and Billy, with all his flaws crushed between the Victor Kane cogs. The next set of events was rapid. Newman pushed the grading schedule forward. Adam proposed a load testing script complete with an objective-looking checklist. Chelsea suggested adding some safety nets trying to ensure that if something went wrong, it would stay in the sandbox. On the other side, King quietly tweaked the configuration, making his modules prettier under standard tests while keeping the remote-activated connections intact in real-world situations. Billy, amid rosy reports, began to believe that his gamble was paying off. But then Jack via Diane showed up like a bucket of cold water. He ordered a halt to production deployment limited to audited isolated testing. He also sent in an internal engineering team and an independent consultant to scrutinize every line of the configuration. The atmosphere changed. The soft spots in Kane's proposal were highlighted. The legal terms were tightened. The emergency lockout was transferred to Abbott. During the brief renegotiation, Kane smiled, but his eyes weren't smiling. He knew he had just lost the most important joystick. One could blame Sally for ruining a quick deal. But a quick deal is never cheap if it comes at the cost of autonomy. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. When the dust settles, The greatest value she brings isn't in preventing Newman from scoring or forcing Kane to take a step back. It's in reshaping the game. No longer a battlefield of intimidation and technical traps, but a transparent, risk-controlled process that puts people and corporate honor ahead of short-term handshakes. Billy may not forgive her today because he'll need time to reflect on what almost happened. But one day, when he realizes he's still running a company with no one holding him by the throat, he'll understand that Sally's decision wasn't driven by stubbornness, but by a rare kind of courage to save someone from their own ambition. On the Newman front, Adam finally got what he wanted, a controlled scoring exercise with enough data to enrich strategy, but not enough to destroy the opponent in a scorched-earth fashion. Chelsea, with the break in her hands, decided to stand by Adam, a choice that showed her willingness to believe in the ethical boundaries he had committed to. Victor certainly didn't forget to take notes, but he also had no clear reason to immediately sow the seeds of chaos. And Kane, despite retreating to supply partner, left something scarier in the ecosystem than any backdoor. The lesson that in the age of AI, real power lies not in the words handover, but in the ability to define the rules of the game. And today, thanks to Sally, Abbott Communications has rewritten some of those rules. The outcome remains open because in Genoa City, there is no such thing as a permanent victory. But now with the audits running, the emergency locks in place, and Newman's tests locked into the sandbox, one can breathe a sigh of relief. Sally didn't win in the superficial sense. She just stopped a train from going off a cliff. And sometimes in a world of giant egos and tech-mashing empires, not going off the cliff is the most significant victory of all. Genoa City has never been short of big bets, but rarely has a trump card been as dangerous as the AI technology Kane is trying to steer. Since Kane's choo-choo train rumbled into action, all the tracks have seemed to lead to one goal: control. To outsiders, it's a risky but promising tech venture. To insiders, it's a maze of power, loyalty, and half-baked promises. This isn't simply a digital arms race between companies, but a test of character for all who dare to board. Billy is caught up in the feeling of holding the reins. Amanda hears sirens from Billy's troubled past. And Phyllis, with her unparalleled intuition, is tracking something more dangerous than any algorithm: a polished lie. The focus opens at the lookout where Michael informs Phyllis that they're basically on the same team now that he's Kane's employee. Phyllis softens briefly as she recalls their friendship as a rock. But the "we're going to help Kane succeed" narrative quickly veers into a gray area where trust is eroded by secrets. When Phyllis calmly asks Michael how he plans to deal with Victor, she's not expecting such a clever, airtight strategy. Michael says he's keeping everything so tightly guarded that Lauren doesn't even know where his paycheck is coming from. That "tell Lauren I'm taking on some side cases" argument sounds neat on paper, but it doesn't get past Phyllis's seasoned radar as the thin lines at the corners of her eyes deepen. A conclusion emerges: Michael is lying, and worse, he's okay. With it, the camera pans away from the observation post to follow Amanda, who knows better than anyone that the decision to hand over the AI to Billy is a gamble. With history's track record is rarely immune to impulse, his instinctive rushes forward often leave gaps in his discipline. Kane uses that truth to convince Amanda Billy only thinks he's in control. It sounds reassuring, but it's actually a psychological tactic. If Billy is just the figurative driver who actually puts the gears and brakes on, there's no need to guess. Telling Amanda that "I've thought it all out" is Kane's way of providing a false sense of security in exchange for her silent cooperation with the next steps. Then the conversation turns to Lily. Kane suggests that Amanda take the initiative to cultivate a friendship with Lily, while probing to see if Lily still sees any good in him. The suggestion isn't a nostalgic gesture. It was a test of reputation and a soft lever for Kane to test the waters in his inner circle. Amanda nodded and headed to the guild. There, she skillfully warmed up a few small talks with Devon before asking to meet Lily privately. Amanda's choice of route, not rushing into technicalities or contracts, but starting with emotions and memories, suggested that she knew Lily well enough to know that every decision Lily made went through her heart before it reached the meeting table. Devon, though only a prelude to the meeting, inadvertently provided a clearer picture of the landscape. Competing paths were overlapping, and any misplaced trust could be the stepping stone to a dangerous compromise. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. In the guild's private room, Amanda asked Lily a question, and few dared to ask how much good was left of Kane after all the beatings. Lily was not naive. She knew Kane's ability to seduce with words and promises of redemption. But Lily also knew the Maddie Charlie wall, the family's rough patches, and the cracks that were only visible when it was too late. So Lily's answer, though unspoken, draws a line. Goodwill may exist, but it's a fragile ticket to the boardroom, not a permanent passport to technological control. Amanda realizes she's just gained the most valuable piece of data. Lily is willing to listen, but not unconditionally support. And if Kane plans to use Lily as a moral shield, he'll have to pay more than a simple price. While Amanda closed the strategic conversation with calm, the emotional temperature continued to rise at the observation post. Phyllis refused to accept the lingering shadows in Michael's explanation. She called it out. "What are you hiding?" That question in the world of Genoa City was more than a demand for transparency. It was a warning. Because once Phyllis smelled something fishy, she didn't stop at questioning. She threatened to go straight to Kane and convince him that Michael was untrustworthy. It wasn't an impulsive act to hurt an old friend. It was a lever to force Michael to choose between honesty and career, between a friendship that had saved him many times and a contract that was making him a shadow in Kane's system. The picture thus emerged as a three-layer chessboard. The first layer was technical, where the real control of the AI lay infrastructure, who signed the keys, who could turn off the lights remotely. The second layer is the legal layer, where vague terms of handover, maintenance, testing, and evaluation can turn goodwill into a bondage rope. The third layer, the most dangerous, is the relational layer. Promises, friendships, feelings of indebtedness, and memories that are so good that people forget to look at the real problem. Michael, by agreeing to keep it secret, even from Lauren, has gone deep into the third layer and blinded himself to the second. Billy, believing himself to be driving the locomotive, has yet to fully grasp the implications of having Kane build hidden stops along the track. And Kane, with the calmness of a designer, seems to have calculated into the matrix that no matter what the outcome, he will still have a hand on the pressure valve. The tipping point will come from Phyllis, as usual. If she goes to Kane and paints a picture of Michael is not trustworthy, it will be both a test of the thickness of the power structure around Kane and a push to force Michael to show his cards. If Michael reacts defensively by lying, by beating around the bush, he will push Phyllis into the camp of proactively exposing the risks. If Michael chooses to come clean, he can save not only Phyllis's friendship, but also himself from becoming an ethical blind spot in the AI deal. The difference between the two paths is not in the words, but in the courage to admit where the paycheck comes from, what the confidentiality clause says, and what he's ultimately working for. For Amanda and Lily, the next trajectory is clear but not easy. Amanda has planted a seed of trust by approaching Lily not as a lawyer, not as a technical partner, but as a friend who understands that Lily's decisions involve the real people involved. If Lily says there's still good in Kane, that doesn't mean she's ready to sign off on a switch in the dark. On the contrary, it might be a condition for Lily to demand a transparent process, independent audits, clear delegation of authority, a testing roadmap that does not overlap with live data, and above all, a commitment not to apply a remote handbrake. By opening the door to this dialogue, Amanda both helps Lily maintain her leadership identity and quietly narrows Kane's space for manipulation. In the grand scheme of things, the AI train carries more than technology. It carries truth and lies, loyalty and betrayal, old lessons and new temptations. Billy may think he's speeding along a straight line, but the Genoa City tracks have sharp curves beyond the tunnel. Michael may believe that secrecy is a way to protect his loved ones, but secrets, when fueled by money and power, rarely stand still. Cain may think his blueprints are perfect, but every architecture of power has a human link. And in that link, Phyllis, Amanda, and Lily are both intentionally and unintentionally tightening the screws in the end. Today's story isn't about who is smarter in the first few moves. It's about who can hold on to the standard when the whistle of self-interest blows over all else. If Michael stops and tells the truth, he can save himself from becoming the worst version of himself and maybe even save the deal from turning into an ethical trap. If Billy listens, he can turn his control freak out into a more mature plan, one where technology serves people, not controls them. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. And Cain, win or lose this round, will have to face the power equation he's created in this world. Those who keep the infrastructure may win the battle, but those who keep the trust have a better chance of winning the long-term war. And with Phyllis skeptical, Amanda wary, and Lily sober, Genoa City is poised for a new shakeup, one where the outcome won't be decided by a line of code, but by the people who are willing to take responsibility for the price of truth. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with the latest news.